On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, the Roman world witnessed one of the most infamous acts of treachery in history. Julius Caesar, dictator perpetuo, the man who had reshaped the Roman Republic and stood on the threshold of monarchy, was struck down not by foreign enemies, not by rival generals, but by his closest allies, men he trusted, men he had spared, and among them, Marcus Junius Brutus, the man history remembers above all others for this betrayal. But to understand why Brutus, a man once loved by Caesar almost like a son, could plunge his dagger into the chest of Rome's most powerful man, we need to dive into the political chaos of the late Republic, the tangled web of personal loyalties, and the myths that have grown around this shocking murder. Caesar's rise to power was meteoric. Through military genius, political maneuvering, and sheer will, he transformed the Roman Republic. His victories in Gaul, his defiance of the Senate when he crossed the Rubicon, and his triumph in the civil war against Pompey had left him unrivaled. But unrivaled power frightened Rome's senatorial elite. They had sworn never to live under kings again since the expulsion of Tarquin the Proud centuries earlier. And when Caesar accepted titles like dictator for life, many senators believed he was preparing to crown himself king. For the conspirators, the fear was not just that Caesar would destroy the Republic, but that he would transform it into a monarchy with himself as tyrant and his bloodline as rulers. Marcus Junius Brutus was not a random conspirator. His family name carried enormous weight in Roman memory. His ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, had been the legendary founder of the Republic, the man who drove out the last Roman king in 509 BCE. This legacy was a heavy burden. Brutus himself had long admired Caesar. Some even whispered that Brutus might have been Caesar's illegitimate son, a rumor that ancient sources mention but never confirm. True or not, Caesar's affection for Brutus was undeniable. He pardoned him after the Civil War, restored him to honors, and treated him with trust. In many ways, Caesar's mercy created the very man who would end his life. But Brutus was also close to other powerful figures. He had once sided with Pompey, Caesar's greatest rival, before defecting. After Pompey's death, Caesar forgave Brutus, a gesture many found shocking. This made Brutus's decision to join the conspiracy even more cutting. For the conspirators, however, Brutus was indispensable. Without him, the murder of Caesar could look like a jealous coup by rivals. With him, it could be framed as a noble act in defense of the Republic. Cicero himself wrote that Brutus's name gave the deed legitimacy. The plot itself was carefully woven. The conspirators, around 60 senators, met secretly, often in the shadows of porticos and temples. They chose the Senate meeting on March 15th, 44 BCE, as the moment of execution. Superstition surrounds this day. Ancient sources claim a seer had warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March. The night before, his wife Calpurnia dreamed of his murder, of blood pouring from his statue, and begged him not to attend the Senate. For a moment, Caesar hesitated. He was even persuaded to stay at home. But Decimus Brutus, not Marcus, but another Brutus, equally close to him, arrived to coax him out, telling him that the Senate was prepared to crown him with a diadem that very day, and that if he refused to appear, suspicion would spread that he sought the title of king. Ironically, it was not Marcus Brutus, but Decimus who ensured Caesar walked straight into the ambush. Inside the theater of Pompey, where the Senate gathered, the trap was set. The conspirators surrounded Caesar, pretending to present petitions. Tullius Cimber grabbed his toga, as if to plead. That was the signal. Casca struck first, slashing Caesar's neck. Caesar cried out in surprise, "Casca, what are you doing?" Then the daggers rained down. Ancient accounts differ. Some say 23 wounds, others fewer. But what all agree on is that Caesar fought back until he saw Brutus. According to Suetonius, when Caesar recognized him, he gave up the struggle. Shakespeare immortalized the line, "Et tu, Brute?" but the ancient sources differ. Some claim he said nothing, only pulling his toga over his head in dignity. Others repeat the story that he spoke Greek. Kai su, teknon, you too, my child. Was this a bitter reproach? Or a prophecy that Brutus too would die by the sword? The truth is lost to history, but the image of Caesar collapsing beneath the statue of Pompey, his old rival, bathed in blood, remains unforgettable. The aftermath was chaos. The conspirators thought they would be hailed as liberators. They rushed through the city crying out, "Liberty! Liberty! The Republic is restored." But Rome was silent. The people loved Caesar, not the Senate. His reforms, his games, his generosity had won him loyalty. And when his body was displayed at his funeral, pierced with wounds, the crowd erupted in fury. Antony's funeral oration, displaying Caesar's blood-stained toga, ignited a riot. The conspirators had miscalculated. Far from saving the Republic, they doomed it. Within 2 decades, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later Augustus, would stand as Rome's first emperor. What of Brutus himself? He fled Rome with Cassius, another leading conspirator, and tried to rally the eastern provinces. For a time, they succeeded in raising armies. But at Philippi in 42 BCE, their forces were crushed by Antony and Octavian. Brutus, seeing defeat, fell upon his own sword. Plutarch tells us he whispered before death, "O wretched virtue, you were but a name, and yet I worshipped you as real." This haunting line captures the tragedy of Brutus, a man torn between loyalty to his benefactor and loyalty to the Republic, crushed by ideals that collapsed in the face of reality. Yet the mysteries remain. Was Brutus driven purely by principle or by ambition? Did Caesar truly intend to make himself king, or was it a false fear exploited by jealous senators? Did he truly utter words to Brutus as he fell, or is that legend, a dramatic flourish layered on history? What is certain is that the murder, meant to save the Republic, instead ended it. And Brutus, remembered forever as the betrayer, is trapped in history's judgment, half patriot, half traitor, and wholly tragic. In the end, the story of Brutus and Caesar is not just about politics, but about the fragility of trust, the dangers of ambition, and the paradox that in trying to preserve freedom, men can destroy it. The Ides of March remains a warning that even the mightiest can fall, not by the hands of enemies, but by those they believed were friends.